Hi everyone, and welcome back to another I keep saying this about all my episodes. All my episodes are very special, but I've really been looking forward to this one because it's actually the second week running that I've been able to bring a guest on who comes under the umbrella of both of my shows. So this is another Dead Men Talk meets Once Upon a Turnbuckle. Cue cheesy intro, which I probably don't have, which I should do. But for this one, I welcome sports writer and author of the upcoming book, which is already on my reading list, even though it's not yet been released. But the upcoming book, Dynamite Davey, The Explosive Lives of the British Bulldogs. I welcome Stephen Bell. How are you, mate?
I'm good, Chris. Yeah, thank you. Actually, day 2 of COVID, actually. So I'm faring up quite well. Yeah.
Oh wow! Well, thank you for coming on.
Never been a better time, really, because obviously completely isolated. But now, obviously, I'm jabbed up as much as I can be.
Yeah.
It hasn't affected me. It was Sunday night. I'm a bit of a square. I go to bed at 9:30 anyway, and
you're a parent by any chance?
About 7 o'clock, I just started feeling completely exhausted, like completely wiped out. I thought that's what a full day with my 2-year-old on a Sunday's done to me. And then so I did my test on Monday morning before going into the office, and sure enough, this little second line of it. That explains that then. So day 2, but all good. No real heartache.
There's so much of it. There's so many people I know, either kids or parents at my kids' schools, neighbours, friends. They just out of nowhere they're testing positive for it. Obviously, it is.
I think it was Bruno. Bruno had a cough for a few days. I think he must have brought it in from play school or whatever. So that ended up well.
Well, thank you.
Get jobs, everybody. Get jobs. It's not it.
No, absolutely. But no, thank you for coming on. I was really excited when I got the opportunity to bring you on, mainly because obviously the book that we'll be talking about features very highly in my world as well. Obviously the writing world and the wrestling world, and you don't get, as a Brit, you don't get much more important than talking about the British Bulldogs, really. We'll get to that. What probably do to begin with, just kind of give a little bit more of an idea of your background in terms of your writing. Sort of when did you decide, or when did you happen about becoming a writer? Was it something that you decided on early on, or something that just really happened?
It were a bit of a sort of a pipe dream, to one day write a book. I'm an engineer by trade. Always enjoyed spinning the yarn, telling a story. Did really got A stars in English at school, and it was just nothing. And like journalism, you're a bit young, aren't you, at 16 to make these life-changing decisions looking back. But sort of sports journalism is probably the direction I should have gone in hindsight. But you're a bit young for all that, making them sort of decisions. So
that was exactly what I left school saying I was going to be.
It just never appeared on my radar. And looking back, I mean, God, I've done for an English combined with an art project. I did a program, like a little magazine for the 2002 World Cup. That's what you're at school. And got A stars for it and everything like that. And yet, for some reason, nobody or myself never sort of went, have you ever thought about sports journalism? It just never appeared on my radar. And then in my sort of mid-20s, I was like, missed boat there. I really should have done that. So I really kept up to speed with. I read loads of sports books, kept up to date with my sort of sports journalism, and listened to Talk Sport all day, that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? And all the time, I think, I think I could do that. I got friends who were actual sportsmen, friends who were in bands. None of them things did I ever think, I could do that, because I know I couldn't. But sports writing. Writing in general, I think if I could do that, if I really wanted to, if I had the time or the inclination or the right opportunity, the right story. And then I went to Brazil in 2014 for the World Cup, and I stayed there for 6 weeks. England were only there for 2 weeks, but that's another story.
That's not your fault.
So we just sort of, me and 2 friends, sort of went on this little adventure, and I'd kind of gone thinking this might be it. I might come back with, something to write about. Never really came off that I thought about it after that. But what I did come back with was this love of Brazilian football, love of Brazilian people, love of Brazil itself. And then 2 years later, I don't know if you know of it, but the Brazilian football team Chapecoense had a plane crash in which almost all the squad and all the everybody died. 71 out of the 77 people on board died. I got completely obsessed with the story, and I'd got a friend in Brazil who sort of really knew the ins and outs of Brazilian football intimately, and I'd kept in touch with him. So I was getting him to send me translated news stories, translated articles, or news programs. He were even putting English subtitles on them for me. And I accidentally, over the course of months, became a little bit of an expert on the subject, and it had completely disappeared off our news stream. Brexit were going on at the time, Donald Trump were in charge, all this were going off, but nobody on this little island seemed to care one jot about this amazing story, because by then I'd gone back and discovered that the club of Chapecoense had, almost gone out of business 10 years earlier. They were playing on dusty pitches. They were in their equivalent, the Brazilian Football League pyramid equivalent of non-league. Okay. And they went on this just completely amazing Roy the Rovers style journey over 10 years to right to the top. They were on their way to the final of the South American version of the Europa League when the plane crashed, and all these heroic football players who'd been on that journey for 10 years, almost all of them perished. And I became completely obsessed with that story. And I just thought to myself one day, I'll never forget where I was. I thought to myself one day, if I don't do it about this, I'll never do it. So I had no idea how to do it really, but I set about doing it, got halfway through, and luckily Pitch Publishing, a brilliant independent UK publisher, the UK's largest sportsbook publisher, took it on, took a punt on me. I'll always be grateful for that. They took a punt on the story, took a punt on me, and it came off. It was really well received.
Was that your first thing that you did?
Yeah.
Or had you been? That was the first writing project.
Yeah, properly, yeah.
Wow.
It was so well received. It did really well, and then I sort of became. I started writing articles for These Football Times, a good online football magazine, and Pitch Publishing told me, feel free to do another. So there was I live in Huddersfield now, and there was a local hero who was an absolute bona fide war hero of World War One. The film Hacksaw Ridge. Well, he was the UK version of Hacksaw Ridge. He completely rescued several people's lives just by running into the line of fire, because he was a rugby player with this unbelievable strength, and just running into the line of fire, running back, running into the line of fire, running back. He was classed as the world's greatest rugby player at the time, went to war, came back, got told that he should never do any sporting activity again, such for the severity of his war injuries. He'd been blown up twice and all. Amazing story. But he got bored, sat at home, went back into rugby league, had a second sort of Hall of Fame rugby career, won everything all over again. And even when that were over, that weren't enough for him. So he went into professional wrestling in 1930 and became the UK's first ever professional wrestling world champion, heavyweight world champion. Right. Unbelievable story. Lived just around the corner from me, so I knew the story quite well. I knew of him quite well, and I thought, right, this is it. I've got a sportsbook publisher telling me that they want me to write something. I've got this story. I can bring this guy's story back to life. That went better than I could have possibly ever dreamed. A lot of the national newspapers, the Mirror group of newspapers, used it as their front page story for Remembrance Day. For Remembrance Day story, once they got wind of it, that so this book was just coming up market at the time, and so out of nowhere, I sort of ended up with this second book, and the name were on front page of a national paper, and it all just felt unbelievably surreal based on the fact that I'd just only 2 years ago decided to sort of give it a bit of a punt.
Wow.
And so that's when I sort of felt. I think there was a sense of responsibility, I think, to keep going. I thought I've managed to, a lot of it luck more than skill, I think. I mean, I've negotiated my way through it really well and worked really hard at it, but the opportunity sort of fell into my lap, I think, having the right story at the right time that the publisher wanted. But I felt a responsibility to sort of keep that going. I thought a lot of people would kill for this opportunity, you know, a book publisher that's willing to support them, and you know, a lot of stories started coming to mind about what I might want to do next.
Cool.
So yeah, that leads us to the third book.
Okay, so I didn't really. I almost didn't want to research your background to death or what I could see, because I like it to be really, you know, organic when I talk to people, find out for myself. I didn't expect that, you know, the fact that, you know, this is very inspirational to me as a writer, and to anyone else out there who is either thinking of being a writer or already is, and probably having the same struggles I do, you know, almost like imposter syndrome. I shouldn't be here. Yes. You know, I shouldn't be doing it. You've just proven there. A kernel of an idea came to you. You went with it. It worked. You were given the opportunity to do it again. It worked. You know, you proved that this writing industry is a tough nut to crack. But if you've got the right story, you know, are these stories that you've done, are they ones that have been covered before, or were they largely unknown, or ignored?
Well, I kind of. I don't want to use the word rushed, but that's the only word that springs to mind at the minute. Jabbercoenty one, because I just thought it was such an amazing story. I'd got it. There almost a bit of paranoia in my brain once I'd sacrificed all this time and effort. You know, it weren't just the actual writing of that book at that point. I wanted to make sure that I was actually quite good. So I did a couple of the old classes on writing and stuff like that, and journalism classes to make sure I were doing the right research. I put an awful lot of time and energy into that. But at the same time, I was like, I can see me getting to a point where I've sacrificed all this time and energy, and all of a sudden it'll be, there's this book out now by some experienced sports journalist. Going to completely blow mine out of water, and I'm not going to get a look in. The market's already going to be flooded, and so there were an element of a little bit of rushing. Like, I wanted to get it done. I wanted to get it there. I wanted sort of my name to be linked to that. I'd put so much. I felt so emotionally involved with that story by the time I'd finished, because it was such an heart-wrenching story that I just sort of. I did want my name to be sort of linked to it in that sports journalism world. And so it hadn't been covered at the time. By the time I was just about to submit, I remember a documentary appeared on Netflix about it, which is very good. And then there's been another documentary since, and there's been books in other languages, but I think mine's still, to my knowledge, mine's still the only English language one. So it was unique at the time. I knew the Douglas Clark book had never been done. Douglas Clark's story was his last surviving immediate relative, were his niece. She's the curator of all his memorabilia and all his belongings. And she actually, there was so much of it that she donated all of it to the Imperial War Museum. He's regarded as such a war hero that they were so grateful to take it. So he's actually got his own shrine, for want of a better word, at the Manchester Imperial War Museum.
Oh, wow.
But the actual collection of his stuff is held in the archives at the London one. So I went down to London and got out all his archives and studied everything that were in there about him, and all. He actually kept war diaries. There's not many of the war heroes from World War I that kept as thorough diaries as he did, and I went through them page by page, making notes and taking pictures, and it gave it this sort of unique feel. I knew it had never been done, that one, and and that's why that one went so well.
As a wrestling fan, and we'll get to this as well, is that the British wrestling scene isn't something that I knew of when I was growing up. When I discovered wrestling, it wasn't the British side. So what you've told me now about him is the first that I've heard. You know, I never really knew his significance to the wrestling world. So, you know, already I want to pick that up and read more, you know, just knowing what this guy did. I mean, it's not just the wrestling either. I mean, he had a story and a half to tell before.
And there's a direct link to the Bulldogs then, because that's when it tied into, I was such a big fan. I know we're going to go into this, but I was such a big fan, sort of early 90s, Davey Boy's sort of crucial era as the British Bulldog. Obviously, the Bret Hart, Hulk Hogan sort of time. I was such a big, massive fan at that era as a 7, 8, 9-year-old kid. that when I got to 16, 17, my fandom had come back through the Attitude Era. And so I started reading books, and I was obsessed with, I wanted to know that a little bit more. I wanted to know a bit more about the behind the scenes type stuff. So I read Mick Foley's book, and then a few years later, when Bret Hart's book came out, I read Bret Hart's book. And that's what really started to add to this sort of fabled story that would become British Bulldogs. By that point, I was that bit older. I knew that they were only from a mining town just like mine, 45 minutes drive away. I started to become aware that even though there were these larger-than-life characters, I'd become aware of the Dynamite Kid as well by then. Even though there were these larger-than-life characters that seemed to be from another world, I've become socially and geographically aware of the fact that they were from a very similar heritage to me, from just up the road. So that forced me to start looking into their lives and the stories a little bit more.
Cool.
So I already knew quite a lot about them at that point. And then it was Douglas Clark that brought professional wrestling largely to the northern English audience back in the 1930s, and that sort of tied in then. That's why it became so synonymous over the decades and into the 50s and 60s. Once you'd got Billy Riley and ultimately Ted Betley, and Ted Betley went on to train Dynamite Kid and Davey Boy. So there were sort of this direct link between the two. And as I was doing all my research into British professional wrestling for the Douglas Clark one, that sort of close tie came in, and I already knew so much about Dynamite and Davey's story, and I was so enamoured with it and the fact that they were from this similar heritage to me, that when tying into what we were about earlier, when I realised that I'd got a third opportunity to write another book, and there were a bit of that imposter syndrome that you're on about. I was like, the two before were like, I know, I was very confident that there was nobody in the UK who knew as much about the Chapecoense incident as me. I was fairly certain that there was nobody alive that knew as much about Douglas Clark as me. The Bulldogs were a complete. That's where I started to feel. Can I do it? Can I do it justice? And it snowballed from where I originally wanted it to be. I wanted it to be just from the sort of the British point of view.
Okay.
It still largely is. I wanted it to, because I think their stories are so much better known, certainly in Canada, but also in the US. There's sort of been a little bit forgotten about over here, I think, Dynamite especially, more than David.
Yeah, it's a shame in a sense. I mean, it wasn't just because I knew I was going to be speaking to you. I just happened across, I was catching up on Dark Side of the Ring. There, last week, there was a few episodes that I hadn't gone and seen. I swore blind I hadn't watched Dynamite Kids one, and it was one that I really wanted to see. But as I was watching it, I had already seen it, but I happily watched it again. It's a shame in a way that it's things like that all we've got, or what most people these days have got to learn about, especially with Dynamite's story, is from something like that, which is obviously going to be his is a sad story. They both were, but really it's the reminder of the tragedy of it. Hopefully your book will, you've got a lot more in there to.
That's what I wanted to do. I didn't want to shy away from any of the controversy. But what I wanted to do, more so than what any 44-minute documentary can do, I wanted to apply all that context, all the backstory, where it fell in the timeline of where they were in their careers, what physical and emotional pain they were going through. The more research I did, the more people that I spoke to. And I sort of started to tie it all together in my head. And the bereavements that they were going through at the same time as they were on these ridiculous scheduling that the WWF were putting them on at the time. The drug culture wasn't just it's got this sort of really bad name for it now, that I think the perception is that there were just these party animals that were going out and just taking these drugs just because they could. It wasn't. They were almost expected to do it because it was the only way that they could get up early enough to catch the flight to the next town, the only way that they could go to sleep early enough to get awake, to be awake early enough. It was the only way that they could sedate themselves from all the injuries from the nightly work. It really was this vicious cycle that they were all falling into. especially quite smaller guys like Dynamite and Davey, with the pressure on them to be as big as the bigger guys. You know, that brought with it acceptance that steroids was just what was expected of them. So, I wanted to cover all that, but I didn't want to concentrate and dwell on it too much. Like I think a lot of the negative stuff has done. I wanted to apply all the context, all the backstory, and I wanted to also. I think something else that doesn't get mentioned is there were teenagers when they left the mine in town. The tiny mine in town, similar to what I have from. I'm from Featherstone originally, you know. I hadn't even been. I don't think I'd even been to Scotland at the age that they went off to make a life for themselves in Canada. Yeah. So people sort of judge them for the mistakes, but there were these young kids, who were going into a complete other world, a complete other culture that they didn't know. And
who did they have looking out for them? Really,
I mean, well, that is where. They did get that, especially Dynamite, especially went into sort of nothing almost, and he became closely linked with the Art family to start. We were running the Stampede Wrestling promotion that he got signed up to. They took him under the wing a little bit, but it was such a sort of firebrand character, such a emotional character that he found it hard to make these bonds until he finally did later on. But by then, Davey had come over, so that introduced Davey to the Art family. And a few years later, they were both actually married into the family and such a crucial part of that dynasty, really. And I mean, I've actually done. I don't know if it's been done before. It probably has been somewhere on the internet. Somebody will have done it, but I think mine will have been the first time that it's actually been done, sort of in print in a proper publication. But I got inspired to do it just because. Even my brother, who's a huge wrestling fan, he's a writer as well. And we talk about each other's projects and stuff all the time. And I'd just be talking as I am now to you, and he'd be going, "Hang on a minute, which one's that again? Hang on a minute."
Have you done a family tree?
I've done a family tree. I had to do it. I thought the readers are going to need this, because I thought if my brother is unsure, as the readers reading, they're coming across these names. You know, there's Dean and Ellie and Jim. And, hang on a minute, was this so? Yeah, somewhere about a quarter way through a book, I've put it in there as a family tree. And I tell you what, I had to limit myself as to how wide I went with it. It could have got more complicated because, you know,
it's a big family, isn't it? To start with.
But it's not just the size of it; it's the interconnectivity. Like Brett and Dynamite married sisters. 2
sisters,
So that could be another. I've omitted that bit because I just didn't have. I'd have needed an A3. I'd have needed an A3 book to get it all up.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Oh, well done, mate. That's brilliant. So, I mean, I'm going to try, you know, we'll talk about Davey and Dynamite, you know, their careers, the stories as we know them, and that sort of as much as we can. But I don't want to spill too much from your book, because I'm looking forward to reading it. You know, I got mine on order. Let's talk about how you started to then put this together. So the research involved, you obviously knew some of the story yourselves. Talk about the people that you worked with, spoke to, you know, that were closest to them. To how did you go about sort of putting the research together?
Well, obviously, Brett's and Tom's book were my sort of first points of reference. They were my first sort of crucial points of reference, and based on that, plus various documentaries, you know, the other one that I got right from the kickoff was Martha Hart, Owen Hart's widow. She's written a book about Owen, about his life and death. So that were a really good start, because she references the whole sort of family history as well. And then sort of Diana Hart had written a book, Bruce Hart had written a book. So I started to put all these together, created myself a sort of a bit of a timeline of everything that had gone off and the sort of key points. And I just sort of really started to highlight key points that I wanted to hit and make sure that I'd got the backstory fully in check for that. And then Bruce was such a key part of that, because he's the eldest of the 12 Hart siblings, and he was over wrestling in the UK in 1977, and he's the guy who discovered Dynamite. Stampede Wrestling were completely failing at the time, and he felt like they needed something fresh rather than just the sort of same old lumbering big heavyweights. And he saw the Dynamite Kid absolutely at 18 years old, tearing the roof off all the venues and the sort of smoky town halls that they were wrestling in at the time, and thought, right, this kid needs to be on a bigger stage. It wasn't easy for him to get him over there, but he did eventually get him over there, and Dynamite then took the place by storm. But then Bruce were involved in various controversies. His relationship with both Dynamite and Davey went up and down, and controversy after sort of a real love-hate relationship he had with both of them. So I really wanted to speak to Bruce, even though I'd got his book. There were a few things that I just wanted to clarify with him, and I just wanted to speak with him. So I reached out to him through an elderly gentleman now who sort of looked after their interests back in the day. He's still, I got in touch with him on social media. I said, look, could you put me in touch with Bruce? And he was kind enough to do so. Bruce is in his 70s himself now, doesn't seem very technologically savvy, as is no need to be at his age. So it were a real old, it were none of this. It was an old dial-up phone. I had to make sure that I'd got no roaming charges and all that set up on my phone, or a bolt on for Canada. And we spoke for about 4 hours. Wonderful guy, could not give me enough of his time. I must have come across quite well. My knowledge of the subject, we started talking about, and that's where the Douglas Clark research came in, because he was such a fascinating wrestling historian himself. As we started talking and as chat went further and further back in time, I know a lot of stuff that he knew about. We'd got shared knowledge of real legends of British wrestling, and so-and-so's name would come up and we'd talk about them. And we just had this fantastic chat. Now, that was as far as I'd gone with speaking to any more of the family members at that point. I'd reached out to Bronwyn, Tom's daughter. I was still yet to hear back from her. And out of the blue, completely out of the blue, Ross got in touch with me and said, I've been speaking to my brother Bruce. He's told me that you're going to write this book about the Bulldogs. You came across really well. I'm not sure the exact words he used, but obviously I had come across well to Bruce, so much so that it sort of recommended me as you might want to get in touch. You might want to speak to this guy who's going to write a good book. So Ross got in touch with me, and that was the sort of key turning point in terms of it being a bigger and better book than I ever dreamt it was going to be, because Ross has got this encyclopedic knowledge, not just of the Art family, but of wrestling in general, not just of the Bulldogs. He's got a real good memory. And so, again, I had a 3 or 4 hour chat with him. But we kept in touch, and I kept referring back to him. I hope you don't mind me bothering you again, Ross, but I'd just like to clarify this, because as the case is with, there's a hell of a lot of stories between all the shoot interviews that are out there now, and all the books, Diana's book, Brett's book, Bruce's book. There's an awful lot of contradictory information. So I was keen to get the true side of the story, and I'd built up this relationship with Ross where I knew I could trust him to sort of give me the honest answer as best he knew it. So I kept referring back to him, and every time he'd send me reams of information, stuff, going off on tangents. Oh, that reminds me of this. That reminds me of this. And I ended up with more information than I ever dreamt I'd get. But we built up this brilliant relationship. I started sending him chapters for him to proofread, and he'd send me some feedback. And then he was that convinced that it was going to be good that he agreed to write me a good forward. And then out of the blue, I got a message off Bronwyn. I've been speaking to my Uncle Ross.
You needed Bruce with the conduit, It
started with Bruce, and then went on to Ross, and then on to, so Bronwyn, Ross has assured me that all your intentions are good, and you're going to write a good book. So I'd like to contribute, and that again was so brilliant, because Bronwyn, I mean, we've turned into really good friends. We're in touch certainly on a weekly basis. She's contributed so much in terms of time, stories. She's written the afterword, which is so emotional. I'd spoken to her about a story, particularly when she got reunited with her dad. And I just thought, the only part of the story that I thought, after hearing her say it, I thought, I don't want to rewrite that in my words. I would have to do everything else, but I thought nobody can do it as good as So I asked her if she would actually write the afterword, including that story and whatever information she wanted. And she's, really tugged on her heartstrings with it. And so she actually calls it an healing process herself for being able to write that. And she actually thanked me for the opportunity again with these humbling moments.
You've done well there before you've even released
it. The feedback from Ross, it'd already done one full edit of the book, or one sort of full proofread and feedback when he wrote the foreword. And one of his first parts of his foreword is that this is the most thorough, and I'm not sure exact words he used, but the sort of most thorough, most accurate version of the Bulldog story that's ever been done. And Bronwyn's feedback was similar. And so it really, to say I only started off, I didn't anticipate it being 125,000 words, and I didn't anticipate it having them level of contributions. I was just sort of looking at it from a British wrestling fan's point of view. What does the typical British wrestling fan know? And I want to sort of fill in them gaps and make them aware. It just became a bigger and better project than I ever dreamt it would be. And I'm absolutely over the moon with it.
Do you think writing it because you mentioned Martha Hart's book and some of the others that have been written from their perspective, some of these stories, do you think it's I wouldn't say better or worse, but easier in a sense to write a story of this magnitude from like a mutual point of view? So it's not your emotions aren't pouring into it. You're dealing with facts as good as you can get them.
Absolutely think that. And the reason that I feel like I know that now is because so many people have written about Dynamite and Davey in their own books or in their own shoot interviews or in documentaries that spoke about them, and immediately it all gets challenged. No, that ain't what happened. No, that ain't what happened. And there's all these contradictory points of view. But every single time, these contradictory points of view are done with that emotional standpoint of somebody's got almost a bit more of an agenda, if you like, their own agenda or their own memories, or putting a certain spin on it, or they're going off what somebody told them at a certain point, and then that story changed magically over time. There's all this sort of, I've put a little disclaimer at the front saying that the book is written purely based on other people's documented anecdotes and versions of events. And what I tried to do was bring them all together and thrash them out and decide, hang on a minute then, so that didn't happen, that probably did happen, and just try and make a real functioning, enjoyable, dramatic narrative out of it. And I've referenced there every single source at the back just to again cover my bases. But I feel like, and again, I've had everything sort of fact checked by Ross and people like that to the best of their knowledge. But there's no way of knowing that you've got everything right. I'm quite certain that there were things wrong in there. But what I've done with a fine tooth comb is try to get to the bottom of all these sort of fabled stories where everybody knows, well, did that happen? Well, did that, I mean, I'd like to think that if it's made it to the book, because there's things that I've taken out because I've then retrospectively decided that I probably didn't have enough evidence for that, or something contradicted it. I've taken things out based on that. If it made it to the book, I truly believe it happened after 18 years of wrestling, no pun intended, with conscience over what should go in there and what shouldn't go in there. So I'd like to think that the fans can read it with some level of confidence that it's very accurate.
Cool. That's one thing, because I must admit it's a story as wrestling fans we all feel like we know, or we know a certain degree of. Has it been done before? Has their story been told, in a book like this?
Certainly not in a book like this. It's been, I would say, like the books that I've already mentioned by 3 different art siblings, all went into the story in different detail or different from a different point of view, or but that were their own books that Dynamite and Davey were almost characters in, if you like, and their story went along. It's never been done in a book in its own right, and it's also never been done in documentary form. Now, Dynamite's had 2 documentaries, Dark Side of the Ring and a High Spots one that got done 10 or 12 years ago. Davey, funnily enough, has never had a proper documentary done, but there's 2.
Understand that.
Well, there's 2 in the works at the minute.
Yeah,
I do understand. I do understand it now, but that's another story. I do.
That's cool. That's cool.
I think I understand why. And so, like I said, there's 2 being signed off now, but I think that the relationship between Dynamite and Davey ended up so splintered and so bitter between the pair that it needed to be somebody completely neutral who were going to tackle the story at the same time, because it couldn't be done. It just couldn't be done. There were only ever going to be a footnote in each other's story, and you can tell it looking back and watching the documentaries and the books that have been done. The sort of almost skirt around the subject of Dynamite and Davey's relationship. You know, they went from tag team champions together, cousins, best friends, to never speak to each other again for the last 20 years of their lives, kind of relationship.
That's a tragedy in itself from a fan's point of view.
I mean, I just said that in 5 seconds, but it actually went up and down and up and down. The relationship was such a roller coaster. And that's what I think people don't know, and because it's never been done from that neutral point of view, looking at one side and the other and each other's point of view. You know, for the first 10 years of the wrestling relationship that they had, it was Davey riding on Dynamite's coattails, and then almost in the blink of an eye, that switched around, and Davey became the star of the partnership, and that was something that I don't think Tom ever fully came to terms with. And so from that point of view, that sort of an in-depth look into that relationship that I've done has certainly never been done before.
Brilliant. Cool. So let's just step away from the book itself into your own memories then, because I remember clear as day my first memories of the British Bulldogs. It's quite an ironic one, really, because the first ever videotape I had of my own was Survivor Series 88. That opening, as it was on the UK release, that opening 10-team match, that 10-team tag match was the opening one. So that was the first thing I saw. They would have been some of the first stars I saw go to the ring. It was their last match, or pretty much their last match in the WWF.
And I believe they were the first team eliminated.
I can't remember that. I probably were. Yeah, it could well have been.
There's a specific reason why they were the first team eliminated.
All makes sense. Sense, I suppose.
Read the book to find out. But yeah, there were a very, almost quite a sinister reason why that they were the first team eliminated, or written to be the first team eliminated. My first memory of, well, I'm guessing we're a similar age, but I obviously knew Davey just from my fandom in the early 90s. He just became part of pop culture, certainly from a British point of view. He was a superhero figure. Going and fighting on behalf of Britain in another world, you know. So it just completely ingrained in me. And then when I came back and became a wrestling fan again at sort of 16, 17, Attitude Era time, Davey were back in it then, briefly, lowered out pecking order and everything, but he was there in his stony wash jeans. And then, you know, like I would say about Freddie Mercury and Princess Diana, you always remember where you were when they died, when you heard that they died. I will always remember where I was when I heard Davey Boy died. I was back into wrestling in a big way. He was the only one, him and The Undertaker were the only two, I would say, that had transcended them 2 eras of fandom that I'd had. You know, Brett had even retired by then, or certainly if he hadn't retired, he were in WCW. They were the only 2, and he was just this always looks. By then, I sort of knew a bit about him being a local lad, if you like, and it just seemed this, you know, larger than life ultra fit character, and died of an heart attack at 39, you know, and all that just completely blew me away. And that was sort of the first time that I really thought I need to sort of have a look into him and his career, and just genuinely interested as a big fan. But around that same time, in fact, it'll have been before that, when me and my brother got back into wrestling in such a big way, a friend of ours hadn't made the mistake of thinking they were too cool for wrestling sort of in the mid-90s. He'd stayed
too cool back then.
He didn't feel, my friend Pete didn't think he was. He'd actually, by the time we were sort of 16, 17, he'd managed to curate himself this huge collection of merchandise, including VHSs. And me and my brother started bringing them home from his house by the carrier bag full and working his way through them a pay-per-view a night, starting with WrestleMania 1, pay-per-view. And worked his way through them. And then it'd have been probably WrestleMania 2. Well, it would have been WrestleMania 2. Well, the first time that I saw the British Bulldogs. Even then, up to my knowledge, it was just the British Bulldog, and that was the first time I saw British Bulldogs. And, I remember thinking, not sort of putting the timeline fully together in my head, I thought, they've obviously just got some English wrestler, you can be Davey's partner, because he was the British Bulldog in my eyes. And it were only when I read Mick Foley's book, and he starts talking about Dynamite and refers in 1986 when he first had his, when he first came into personal contact, and it's an anecdote that he goes in depth in his book. He describes Dynamite Kid as pound for pound the best wrestler in the world at that time in 1986. I'm thinking, 1986, that is the time of WrestleMania 2. And I thought, God, what a disservice I was doing. Dynamite Kid. I thought it was just somebody that, you can wrestle with Davey. You're British. You can. So that's when I started doing a little bit more research into Tom. And then, like I said, it'll been a matter of months or a year or two later when Davey died, I started doing a bit more research into Davey, and that's where it all started coming. That's 20 years ago now. All sort of started back then when I look at it. Then we worked his way through all the pay-per-views, all the way up and all the way through to catch up to where we currently were in like 2001. Watched every single one. So then, obviously, going through SummerSlam 92 being sort of the ultimate peak of Davey's career, but I mean, he had some amazing pay-per-view matches with Brett in particular. And so I still had probably only seen, unfortunately, at that point, 5 or 6 matches of Tom's. Because he's got all these hidden gems from Stampede and Japan that, you have to go search on internet to find. Whereas Davey had all these sort of mainstream ones that were out on VHS. So that's a real reflection of how the careers and how their reputations ended up. Dynamite with this sort of cult underground hero that you had to go reading about in obscure books, obscure magazines. And you had to
part of the appeal when you realise. I did exactly the same thing.
Exactly,
Even though I saw them as the Bulldogs the first time, it never resonated because this was 91 I first got into it. So I was kind of backtracking over a few years. But it was, when I majorly became aware of wrestling as a current product was 92. He was over here. He was the man, wasn't he? Going into SummerSlam. So I exactly like you, I recognised him, and it was only through those early tapes that I knew that Dynamite was even around. But I was going to ask actually, what do you feel is the reason why Davey is, sadly the most recognisable of the two, and Dynamite became that kind of, not the one that we always had to go back to find out why did his reputation not sort of come forward ahead of Davey?
Well, there were timeline issues certainly that worked against him. 1986, November 1986, Dynamite had got a serious back injury. He was wrestling with so many back and knee injuries. He needed multiple operations at the time, but he was just surviving on getting by day to day, using pain medication and various other substances just to get him through to the next town, to the next match. And his back finally crumbled under him in a match in Canada in 1986. he never fully recovered from that. Now, obviously, wrestling was just at the start of its huge boom then. And so the Dynamite Kid, at that point, Davey became the star. Davey became the guy for the Bulldogs who spent the most time in the ring. He was the guy who did all the big spots. And he looked $1 million, as they say. Dynamite at that point, unfortunately, did look like a supporting character to Davey. Going back for the previous 7, 8, 9 years, it was completely the other way around.
Yeah.
Dynamite was regarded by the whole industry as the man, one of the best sort of 2, 3, 4 in the world, sought after everywhere, had every promotion in the world clambering over themselves to offer him this big money. But again, that came just at a time before the sort of big boom and the big pay-per-view era as it became. And then it did become miserable, I think would be the right word to use, about the way that his career had turned out. He had a real fighting attitude anyway. And again, it's not me that's made that word up, miserable. It's a word that gets used a lot. He had this real down, depressed sort of attitude about him. And as time went on, he became a little bit slightly bitter about his career and how it had all panned out, and that Dave was the star and Brett will become the star. Unfortunately, he didn't do himself any favours in that regard. He wanted to become, so he went off back to Japan, again, back sort of off the radar, was still a huge star in Japan. He still is to this day. They do a 10-bell salute whenever one of the true heroes of Japanese wrestling die, and they had one for Dynamite when he died. And, he'll be forever remembered as one of the gaijin. They refer to them as the foreign wrestlers on Japanese soil, and he will always be regarded alongside sort of Bruiser Brody and Stan Hansen and Andre the Giant as the ultimate gaijin. So we were happy to be sort of off the radar a little bit, and that suited him. He didn't really like that limelight. And then that went the other way around for Davey. He sort of was coming into his peak as that ultimate limelight were available and that big money were available. And the WF juggernaut just went rolling on through. And he was a lot more, I think, as a person, he was a lot more suited to that limelight, where Dynamite didn't like it, shied away from it. And he were always one step away from his next controversy, which sort of didn't help. And so that's why I think that's probably why he's not in the WWE Hall of Fame like Davey is, because that controversy has stuck with Dynamite. Right. You could argue that many of the inductees into that Hall of Fame have got as much controversy.
I was just about to say,
including Davey himself. Davey the last few years were mired in controversy, and because they had such a lot of others had such a longevity at the top, where they'd got so many big matches in that mainstream for people to refer back to in people's immediate consciousness. Dynamite didn't have that for the casual fan. He had it for the hardcore fan. I just think that's why the nature of life is that, sort of mud sticks, if you like, and people started to associate more when they heard the name the Dynamite Kid. Your casual wrestling fan, your hardcore wrestling fan, didn't they? Just thought, oh wow, one of the best of all time. Your casual wrestling fan thought, oh, that's the real controversial, miserable guy. When you mention the British Bulldog, you think of SummerSlam '92. You think that your brain doesn't automatically go to that last few years where, you could argue we had as much controversy as Dynamite. So I think there's a lot of that, I mean, who hasn't, Steve Austin, Hulk Hogan, they've all got a bit of controversy around their lives.
And the thing is, it's
because they had that major exposure. It seems to whitewash it a little bit, and Dynamite's never been given that whitewashing treatment, I don't think.
No, that's it. I was going to say, it seems very much a more open playing field these days. Again, things like Dark Side of the Ring do make us more aware of what goes on behind the scenes and how it can affect these guys as human beings. Everyone has their demons, whatever they are, and the guys who are still being talked about as wrestling gods have a slew of them that they have put before all of us now, but they still get held in that highest regard. So I'm hoping one day, you know, the WWE Hall of Fame, I think, you know, to me as a wrestling fan, isn't as important. I think, you know, what the wrestling fans remember is probably more important than having a plaque.
Well,
there, but
you're absolutely right. And when you look, I think when it started off, it probably was, you know, it started, I think Andre the Giant was the first inductee.
Yeah.
It started wanting to be this Hall of Fame for the guys who'd contributed so much. And you've got so many people in that WWE Hall of Fame who never actually wrestled in a WWE ring. I think that's what they hide behind a little bit with Dynamite. I don't think they've come out and said it, but it seems to be the theory is that they can always say, well, he only wrestled in the WWE for a couple of years, WWF as it was. But they've got guys in there who contributed an awful lot to the wrestling business, even if they were just promoters or wrestled for completely different promotions their whole career. Dynamite, nobody contributed as much in terms of changing the business in ring and having that.
I don't think physically I've seen anyone, maybe, you know, one or two others since. One unfortunately doesn't get talked about these days, but very, very much in the same sort of physical style as Dynamite. I don't think I've seen many people put their body on the line like he did.
No, and that's what I was just going to go back to there. I think more so certainly these days, and probably has been for quite a long time, because the WWF Hall of Fame has become so much watered down with people who you're like, really? You know? And that's why Davey's induction seems so much overdue when you look at other people that were in there. But I think Dave Meltzer's Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame is classed as being a little bit more legitimate, a little bit more even. And Dynamite went in that, I think it was in 1996 when he first retired. You know what I mean? He was one of the first ever ones in it. You know, and I think that adds a little bit of balance. So yeah, I think within the industry, it doesn't need to be in the WWE Hall of Fame. I've actually got a theory myself on why they never got offered it, and that's that. I think Vince thought he might have told him where to shove it, if I'm honest. But, you know, I'm not saying he would have done, but Vince did offer him to come back, and it turned him down flat in no uncertain terms. It wouldn't surprise me if Vince feared that he might do the same with an induction offer. That'd be embarrassing, wouldn't it? So maybe that's what it was.
Oh, I like to think that. Seeing the T-shirt you're wearing, I need to ask, obviously, about Brett. I saw you put on social media recently that you did actually get to talk to the man himself. Brett, I will go on record. Anyone who has listened to Once Upon a Turnbuckle before, I do talk about two wrestlers who were my heroes during the 90s. The first one was Bret Hart. He was such a massive part of my childhood. You know, spending any time talking to him would probably be amazing. What was that like for you?
Yeah, it was unbelievably surreal. What happened? Again, it was Ross had said. He'd said, "Do you want me to?" Oh, so sorry. Going back a little bit further, Brett had already volunteered to me. I'd got in touch with him through Bronwyn to start with. Bronwyn is his niece, once removed, if you like, but she is best friends with her cousin, who is Brett's daughter, and so she is in sort of direct contact with him. And I'd said to her, look, the rules are for them who don't know. I'm sure you do know, but when you're referencing sources, books and things, you can use sort of 300 words without any issues. Anything more than that, you should be getting permission. I'd used, I don't know, 1,000, 2,000 of Brett's, whatever. I haven't used many quotes, but his are so perfectly worded in his book, coming from him as a source. I thought, right, I really wanted to use them. So I put the word out through Bronwyn. And sure enough, she got back to me and said, look, Brett's now aware of your book. He wishes your support. What he said is, will you write a bit about the book, a bit about yourself, put all the quotes that you want to use, create like a bit of a letter or a document and send it to him. And he'll review it. And because he's been misquoted in the past, that's what she says. He's been misquoted so many times in the past. He wants to know what you want to use, why you want to use it. So again, wrote this document, sent it off to him in a matter of days, got back to me through Bronwyn saying, and Bronwyn said, he wants the same thing, send in again, but he wants a line at bottom for his signature and date because he's happy with it and he wants to formally sign it off to you. I thought, wow, amazing.
Wow.
So next thing, I got this document sent back with Bret Hart signed at bottom and dated. So I thought, wow, that's it. I didn't really need or want anything more from him. Very busy man. I didn't feel like, as much as I'd love to interview Bret Hart, I didn't. His book is 500 odd pages long. I felt like he got all the information as long as he stood by it now, which he confirmed to me that he did by signing this document. You know, if he'd have put, actually, I got that wrong at the time. He didn't put that. So I thought, well, I've got all the info that I want off him. I've got his signature on a bit of paper. What more do I need? It were Ross towards the end, and by that point, the book's going through its editing process. It was really too late to make any changes. He said, I've been talking to Bret. He were interested. Would you mind if I give him your contact information? No, of course not.
What? Wake me up.
So give him he must have given me email address. And weeks went by, and I was talking to my brother. Again, my brother's and by the way, going back to what you said, same for me. Bret was my wrestling hero, hands down. I'm not just saying that now. Absolute hands down. And I think because of reading his book and doing so much research into everything that went off behind the scenes and all the stuff between him and Shawn Michaels, you know, it was just the real life babyface. It really was on everything. It seems like he seemed to get himself embroiled in things just by being the good guy. And it was. I think it was just the eternal real life babyface. And so my brother said to me, did you ever hear back from Bret? And I went, oh, no. So I'm not expecting to really, you know, it might have just been polite to Ross saying that it'd give me get in touch. And then my brother said, why don't you check your spam? I said, I'm expecting if it comes, it'll be on email. He said, check your spam. I said, nobody just sends, you know, no one's in spam these days except stuff that should be in spam, surely. But I did. And sure enough, there it was. Subject line, Hitman reaching out. I thought, I'll never forget it. Hitman reaching out. And sure enough, there, an email with his contact details. Feel free to give me a ring anytime you want. I'd like to hear from you firsthand about your project. And so I gave him a ring one evening. We spent 31 minutes on the phone. I know it was 31 minutes because I looked at the phone after, and you're just surreal Bret Hitman outgoing call. And so when I said that to my wife, she went, I want your phone to me. I went, 31 minutes. She went, why don't you just say half an hour? I said, listen, every
minute an extra minute.
If I say half an hour, people will think it were only 25 minutes. I don't know. If I say 31, people know it was 31. But anyway, he was supportive, humble. We started talking about British wrestling and from his time over here. So people that had come into my world through my research, he'd actually come across in real life, and we started talking about these obscure characters again. It was just really nice, and he wished me all the luck with the book. And yeah, I never thought I could speak any highly of Bret, but I still can't now.
That's brilliant. You know, what an extra thing to say, you know, on that this book has brought about, you know, for you as a wrestling fan. Really, I think that there's not much else that you can try and attain that's bigger than that.
No, that was the ultimate imposter syndrome, I think. Yeah.
Hey, you earned it, mate. You earned it. So just while we kind of, you know, we'll have to wrap it up in a minute, unfortunately. Again, I don't want to spill too much of the book out there. I'm really, really looking forward to getting my copy. I will be reading it as soon as it lands. The release date is actually my birthday.
All right.
So, you know, all the better for me.
Actually, it's gone back a week, but I'm not sure if you already knew that and you said that. It's April the 11th now.
Yeah, that's my birthday, so that's cool.
All right. You did know that. It was originally April 4th, so it's gone back a week. So
okay. Yeah. So it's an extra special, you know, present for me.
Excellent.
Let's kind of, before I give you the floor to really, you know, give us the last sort of plug for the book, as it were, and where we can find you. Memories, I need to ask. So your favorite, as a fan, I suppose, your favorite Dynamite memories and your favorite Davey Boy memories, collectively or separate?
my favourite Davey Boy match is, from a wrestling point of view, it's him Brett, but not at SummerSlam. They had In Your House pay-per-view main event in 1995, December 1995 in Your House. Amazing match. You know, they really rolled back the years to the old Stampede days. The Brett writes about it in his book as well, that they felt that the only way that they could top the SummerSlam main event was to really go back to the sort of hardcore, gritty kind of matches that you used to have in Stampede Wrestling. And once I've done the research into that and what that was like, and then going back and watching that match again, you can see it so much.
That's probably what I was missing, because I must admit, when I saw that match, it's still not one of my favourites, because I think it's a real step away from the classic they had at Wembley. And I love the two good guys against each other and whatever. I didn't, as much as I thought it was a breath of fresh air. Davey as a heel, I didn't like as much, and I thought this match was almost too brutal for them. But actually, hearing that, it's like, okay, this was the true kind of match that they'd had way before Wembley.
Yeah, and again, I'd only rewatched that after knowing all that. I learned about Stampede Wrestling and a couple of matches that they had back then, and what Brett writes in his book about he felt that was the only way that they could compete with what they'd done at SummerSlam. And then when I went back and watched it, you can sort of see it happening there in front of you, and it's cool. really good. But my favourite wrestling moment of Davey altogether is, again, it's got a lot to do with the fact that I've done so much research into the Hart family and Stampede and Calgary, and that is the In Your House Canadian Stampede pay-per-view, when it was the Hart Foundation against Team USA, which were led by Stone Cold at the time. And the atmosphere for that, I would give anything to be in that arena now. I mean, the place is literally shaking. The commentators are screaming to the JR. It's shaking. The camera is shaking because the fans are just absolutely wild. Yeah. And you just can't really.
I watched that recently. I didn't appreciate it at the time.
It's a once in a lifetime kind of atmosphere that I don't think it had been sort of replicated before or since, if I'm honest, in terms of that.
That's cool.
That level of sort of wild abandon of fans.
Yeah.
Dynamite, I think most people refer straight back to his Tiger Mask matches. And they're brilliant. They're brilliant to watch. Just because, I mean, I think if you just want sort of a short frame of reference in top quality, if you have got WWE Network, there's the one that they did for WWF, as it were at the time, in 1982. They put sort of, it sounded like it's a 7 or 8 minute exhibition, if you like, that Vince had booked them to do. But they sort of crammed the full repertoire into that 7 or 8 minutes, and it's just it's just amazing. And you can see what's brilliant there. You see the fans, they're all sort of wandering around as though they're treating it as almost a bit of a break in proceeding. You know, when you look at the rest of the card, there are all these big names on before and after. I think to start with, who are these two little guys on? Who they don't really know. By the 1 or 2 minute mark, they're all open mouthed at what's going off at ring. By the 4th or 5th minute mark, they've all got their head in their hands and screaming and cheering. And to see them just sort of take it's Madison Square Garden, see them just take Madison Square Garden sort of by storm like that is brilliant. But in terms of Dynamite, if you can even go back and watch his old World of Sport when he was 17, 18, you've sort of never seen anything like it. The athleticism, it's like watching a gold medal gymnast suddenly transported into a real life legitimate fight, because he looks so realistic in what he's doing at the same time as he's doing all the high flying moves. You can almost go and watch any Dynamite match and you're guaranteed to be entertained. Some of the Stampede stuff that's on, you can find on the internet. Him and Brett as youngsters against each other.
But down, it looks bloody real when you go back. You know, the athleticism that you get these days, personally, very choreographed, very, very obvious that they're doing everything they can to keep each other safe.
Slapping the leg.
That's it. And back then, obviously, they were keeping themselves and their opponents safe, but you fully believed, and a lot of the time it was, obviously, you know, that stuff hurts. But I just think it's so much more.
Well, Dynamite had the mentality. It was that or nothing. It was realistic, or he weren't doing it. You know, it was.
Yeah.
And he didn't care about being hurt himself. He proved that time and time again.
Yeah.
But he also didn't care. He didn't really mind if he hurt his opponent. You know, if so long as the fans went home happy, that is what he writes in his book time and time again. There, he prides himself on that he doesn't believe any fan ever walked out of an arena on a Dynamite Kid show feeling shortchanged. You know, that one. That was his mantra. But yeah, if anybody's got network available to them and they've got 7 or 8 minutes spare, you won't have many better things to do than go and watch that Dynamite Kid versus Tiger Mask match.
There you go. And soon enough, people won't have anything better to do, or no better thing to do than to buy your book. So, you know, last couple of minutes, just let us know, just let us know again where it's going to be available, where we can pre-order it, when it's out, where we can find you to find out more about you as a writer or the book itself.
The book is available for pre-order on Amazon and other book outlets now, as are my 2 other books, if anybody's interested from what I've said about them. All 3, or the pre-order for Dynamite and Davey and the 2, are also available on my website, which is stephenbellwrites.com. Signed copies available there, or signed copies available for pre-order of Dynamite and Davey. I've got a dedicated Twitter page for the book, which is Dynamite and Davey, or at Bulldogs Book 123. I put some sort of sneak previews on there, some exclusive photos that I've got given from family members, and just a bit of teasing stuff every few weeks. So yeah, it's proven quite popular with people who sort of getting excited for the book, a bit of a countdown to put these teasers on. I'm personally at Stephen Bell _1985. If you want to follow me, you're more than welcome. All DMs are open and stuff. If you want to pre-order, if you want to chat to me about anything, the journey I've been on, more than welcome all that. You can pre-order a book just by sending me a message, signed one, personalised messaging it, whatever you want. There's a mechanism there for it.
Cool. Thank you very much. And thank you again, Stephen. This has been epic. It's as good as I was expecting it to be, and more, getting to talk to you. I cannot wait for the book. I will, obviously, I'll let you know what I think as soon as I've read it, as I'm sure a lot of people will.
But yeah, I think you can tell I'm sort of at the stage now. It's all submitted, and I'm so excited about it. I probably come across like that, a bit of a coiled spring when I start talking about it. I do feel like it's almost the culmination of all that writing journey I've been on. The culmination of that wrestling fandom and everything that started sort of 20 years ago. So, thanks for having me, Chris. I really enjoyed it.
No, thank you. And for me, this is really quite a culmination. I put Once Upon a Turnbuckle to bed last year, and I think this, for me, having you on to talk about this, it really does, in the most perfect way, does sort of bring both of my podcasts to a point where they almost meet in the middle, and it's been fantastic for me. So thank you.
Oh, brilliant! Thank you.
No worries, and hopefully speak to you again, mate.
Of course you will.
If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to like, share, and hit the subscribe button. Also follow us on Facebook and Instagram to keep updated about all future shows.